So why Photoshop? Well, working in Photoshop, you can create visually appealing graphics, you know, for many different things that we deal with in life, whether it be for a PTA meeting, a fundraiser, school marketing or graphics, a big event or fundraiser at your school, maybe stuff for the foundation. And contextually, it can go anywhere with real life, right? Everything we see is visual and related to marketing. So really graphics heavy world that we live in. So it's really fun. But on a personal level, you know, I like to use Photoshop a lot for touching up photos, designing invitations, postcards. I used to do a lot more work in Photoshop prior to the rollout of Lightroom, which is a photo editing tool that's part of the Adobe Creative Cloud that kind of automates photo editing at a different level. But you can do some really fun things with Photoshop. You could do a lot of superimposing with really cool graphics for more personal things or for fun projects you have going on in school. As a computer graphics teacher, I used to explore, talking about exploring opportunities in authentic lessons. I used to do service learning and project-based learning, basically initiatives or projects for my high school students, and we would do anything from current affairs to politics to traditional marketing to local marketing. We actually did some service learning. We connect with local businesses that asked if they wanted to do a redesign of their logo, and talked a little bit about their audience and those types of things. So really, there's a lot of educational opportunities with Photoshop, even if it's just for a small project. Say you're an elementary teacher or even a middle school or high school teacher, but wanted to diversify your lesson and your opportunities for kids showing their work and their ability through using Photoshop. It's actually a great opportunity. So with that said, there's many different things of why we want to learn Photoshop. Now, first, before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about accessing Photoshop at APS. So installing Photoshop, we actually have this form. So if I click on this form here, but here's basically the steps for this upcoming school year on how to get your own Adobe Creative Cloud license in APS, which is much cheaper than traditional Adobe Creative Cloud. So if I just search up Adobe CC and I want to purchase it, it's going to be quite expensive. So you'll look at kind of individual pricing, and you'll notice that it's really quite expensive for individuals. I mean, there's discounts for educators, there's discounts for students, but you'll see monthly plans. Like typically a monthly plan for an individual is like $53 a month. If you're an educator, you can get it, I think, for in and around $30 a month. And so it could get quite expensive. I was actually looking for the page that had the breakdown, because you could get like Photoshop and Lightroom and a few different smaller packages that are much cheaper, but it is quite expensive. So with APS, we actually have the ability to do individual license for $10 a person, and that's including students or staff. So if you have a room full of 30 students or you have 150 students, you know, it would be in and around, you know, 150 bucks for 10, or, you know, 1,500 for 100 students, but it's quite affordable as compared to a normal license structure paid directly through Adobe. You could also get a device license. Device license, you basically install the Adobe Creative Cloud on the device itself, on the laptop or desktop, and you basically use your APS login credentials to access with an Adobe account to access that device license. So whether you want a device license for your lab or your classroom, or you and if your kids have Chromebooks and you want licenses for the kids, you can actually get licenses for the kids that are not device licensed but individual licenses, and then they can use the lighter versions of the apps on their Chromebook, and they can also install Adobe CC on their home personal computer if they had a computer powerful enough to do so at home. So you know, just by doing a simple search, you'll see that you have Adobe apps on the Chromebook, and you can download these through the Play Store, and they're made available right now. And so those are available if you want to do them. So it's Photoshop Mix, Lightroom Mobile, Illustrator, Draw, Actually, they're actually retiring Illustrator Draw, which is really nice. It's a hand-drawn vector tool, but there's a lot of flexibility around using Photoshop and other Adobe apps with Chromebooks and with students. But if you really want the Cadillac of Photoshop, and if you will, then you really want to use like a PC or a Mac. So with that said, you have this device purchase options within APS at a discount. So we basically pre-purchase all these different licenses and then allow for people to purchase. So you could purchase them individually. So like if I had $10 in my pocket and I wanted to pay EdTech for a license for a year, I could do that on my own with my personal money. You can also advocate with your site administrator or department to request that you get a license, because you also get other tools like Adobe Acrobat Pro and all the other kind of cool Adobe CC apps. So it's really cost effective. It's really cheap. We accept any form, POs, personal checks, cash, whatever. It all goes into an enterprise fund, which we make our money back on those pre-purchase licenses. So anyways, with that said, there's a ton of information here on how to get that going. If you buy in a whole class set, it gives you information on how to use a template, so we can get that. And then there's a form right here to generate your own invoice if that's needed through a school purchase. So some useful information there in terms of gaining access to Photoshop. Also, we have documentation for individuals to install Adobe Photoshop independently. So if you click on that, there's basically a guide on how to do it. So for most people, if you're doing your individual kind of thing with Photoshop, you can purchase a license independently with a check, money order, or cash via EdTech. And you basically go into this space. You go to this website here, and you start off by downloading the Adobe Cloud app, all apps, Creative Cloud all apps, because basically that cost that we give you is for all applications, which actually makes it a sweeter deal because it's so cheap. Whereas you could buy Photoshop for like $15 or $20 a month versus for $10 one time for the entire year, you get the entire suite. So once you gain access via your APS login, we actually created a federated ID for you. You can log in with your APS login credentials and then get access to these apps and download these apps. And then once you download the Creative Clouds apps, you can open up that window. So I can't show you here, but down below in my menu bar, I actually have the Adobe Creative Cloud app, which is basically like an interface like this. So I'm going to try to sign in and show you what it looks like. So since I'm a Adobe administrator for the district, I'm going to use my admin account versus actually, I'm not using my admin account with this. You can log in with your Google account as well, but you're going to use a different login method, I guess is what I'm saying. And we continue here. Okay. So you'll see here that once I purchase the license and I have my account associated with the Adobe license, you can actually use this interface to download. So you want to manage your apps through the Creative Clouds apps, and you download this program. And then it gives you an interface similar to this where you can download Photoshop, you can download Premiere, Illustrator, you can download whatever you want. And it basically is an interface for you to manage your apps downloaded on your computer. So pretty easy stuff. It takes you through the steps of selecting everything, getting logged in, accessing the Adobe, the App Center, and then downloading Creative Cloud, and then managing your apps from your computer. So we have all that information here on the slide deck. So that's kind of how you get started with Adobe Creative Cloud. Now we get into the fun thing. So to Photoshop itself. So I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting that window and open up a Photoshop window. And so I'm going to stop presenting for a moment here. And I'm going to share my screen. There we go. All right, so there's many different reasons, and I don't know, really quickly, I wanted to ask, like, what your what your intended use of Photoshop is going to be, so I can kind of focus on more of that. So I know that some of you may want to focus on like activities and lessons for Photoshop. I think what I had planned today was basically fundamentals that kind of translate for both lessons with students and also personal use. So if there's anything specific that you want to know, or you have any specific wants or needs out of this training, please let me know or ask any questions. Feel free to, we have so few people here that if you guys want to just unmute yourself and ask, that's fine. But I think we'll just kind of go through the basics and go from there. So a couple different things when you get into Photoshop. So Photoshop is a basically a tool where you can manipulate and play with vector graphic and raster graphics. So vector graphics are shapes that can scale infinitely, and raster graphics are a certain size and pixel, have certain pixels assigned to them. So like for instance, this image right here, and I guess let me back up before we get into this. So this image is a new document that I created. To get started with a new document, you'll get this interface typically when you open up Photoshop, and you'll basically have these presets at the top that say like recent. So these are recent files that I worked on. We have save files, we have photos. So you have presets for photos. So you can actually open up templates where you can like superimpose things. So like these ones are for like mocking up like designs or posters inside of frames. But you can do all kinds of stuff. You do like wood collages, and they have some fun presets. But you can also look at like typical photo sizes. So like a typical photo you get printed somewhere is like 7x5, 6x4, 3x2. And then you go into print, you can do like a letter, legal, tabloid, which is 11x17. And then you have art and illustration. So you have like a pixel grid. You can do posters, like typical poster size. So this is a standard poster size, 18x24, also 16x20. And then you have things made for web graphics, so like pixels based on web pages or web graphics. So you can start with any of these. You can do mock-ups for like iPhones. You know, they have standardized sizes. You can do film and video. So if you just need to do a screen for like a video, or maybe like a, you know, in YouTube, you can upload your teacher videos to YouTube, and you want to do like a standard design template with your name on it or your class name on it, you can actually design it in here and then assign that image to YouTube as a standalone graphic. So what I did is I selected a 7x5 photo just so it's higher quality. So typically photos, you'll notice the resolution is 300 pixels per inch. So per square inch, there's 300 pixels in there. And the higher the pixel level, the more fine or refined it is. That's where you get things like with graphics, even with video, you get like 4K and 8K and high HD and what have you, because the pixels really translate over. So if you do film and video, you'll see that it's still pixels per inch, but there's a specific resolution assigned to that. And you'll see like this is 1080p, right? And this is 720p. But you'll see the similarities in print and similarities in photos in terms of pixels per inch. And you can actually change this. You can change the measurements of the document to millimeters, centimeters, points, picas. Typically inches is the most familiar, or pixels. So it's really nice to do that. So anyways, I created a 7x5. I created it, and then that's where I got this document. Then what I did is I used a shortcut to open. And then I opened up files. So like, say for this one, I just opened up this photo. And then what I did was I drug it out like this. And I drug it into that file. And you'll see when I drug it over from one window to another, it created a layer. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And now I have two layers. So I need to get rid of one. So I'm going to trash that, or you can drag it to the trash. So basically, this is how I got all my photos in here. I opened up independent photos and I drug them into this space, which was a preset photo 7x5. So now getting started with Photoshop, you have tons of tools over here. You have a move tool, you have some selection tools. And actually, if you hover over them like this, you're going to see a lot of different options here. And so you'll see that there's a small little tiny triangle at the bottom right of this box I'm hovering over. And if it has that little triangle, that means if you click and hold it, there's other tools. So like this one doesn't have another tool, but all of these ones up here have other tools. So again, if he has that little triangle at the bottom right, that little tab, there's other tools in that section. So you can also expand the tool bar like this. It doesn't do much in terms of expanding it. It just condenses it differently. So I do more of a vertical view. And then of course, any tool that you select on the left, there'll be respective more granular tools on the top. So notice this top bar up here. Notice this top bar where my cursor's flying over. It's on the very top. If I click a tool on the left, those options on the top change. So there's more granular level tools for each tool inside of Photoshop. So Photoshop's probably one of the most robust image softwares, like editing softwares that exist. So it's quite extensive. So typically you just want to get the move tool. Now I can click and move this around. And what's interesting though is if I have multiple layers turned on, you'll notice that I'm only moving the background layer. And that's because I have this layer selected over here in the bottom right in my layer panel. If I select the sunset, then I can move, sorry. If I select the sunset, I can move that around. If I select the eye, I can move that around. You can also have the option of auto selecting. So if I check this box in the top left up here, auto select, I can actually click on the sunset, then click on the eye. That could be helpful, but it also could be a pain in the neck and impede your workflow. So typically I leave that off and I just select what I want down here. So that's your basic move tool. Now, really, before we get into the actual tools a little bit more, let's talk about layers. So each layer has a few different options. I can click on it and then rename it, hit enter. I can also double click the layer and it opens up this dialog box that gives me blending options. So I can do like, I can assign different like overlays and gradients to it. So like if I did this, you'll see I just overlay a gradient and then I can change transparency over that layer. I can do a solid color overlay. And if I click on that area, you can duplicate it and do different color overlays. Oops, and I have a dialog box over here. So there's different things you could do with that. You can uncheck them. So all you could play with this. I could spend a ton of time. I could spend probably an hour just going through all of these. But there's different options here in terms of like inner glow, shadow. You know, what I would do is just get familiar with the look and feel, and you'll notice it's getting the edges here. So that's what this is doing. And you have these interesting kind of overlays, and you're applying like effects to the layer. I'm gonna go ahead and cancel. If I had saved something, let's say I did a gradient overlay, and I hit OK, you'll notice that the layer says FX on the side right here, and that's for the effects. And you can actually toggle those off and on. If you have multiple ones, they'll be all listed here, and then you can toggle them off and on. But that FX is basically just letting you know you have effects applied to it. Another option too with like layers like this is you can do like adjustment layers on top of it. So basically what you do is you click this little circle down here that has like that's half black, half white, and then you'll see that you can do some other things. So like say I want to let's see, say I want to change the exposure. You'll see that it does an adjustment layer. So an adjustment layer is a layer that sits on top of the original layer and is tied to it. And this adjustment layer, when I created it, you'll notice up above here that I get these tools. So these tools allow you to make that adjustment for that layer without impacting the layer. So this is like applying changes to the layer without actually changing the layer itself. So see, I could turn that off and then my layer is back to normal. So this adjustment layer can be accessed here, and there's a bunch of things you can do here. You can actually adjust the color. You know, you want like warmer tones, or you want cooler tones. You could do stuff like that. You can also adjust shadows and midtones. So if I want to adjust shadows, I can play with those as well. You can give it like a cool Instagram look, like that. You know, so you could do some fun stuff. So the important part of this is just any layer that you select. Oops. Any layer that you select, you can simply select it and then add an adjustment layer. And then work on the exposure. And then you can also delete it. So you can right click and delete it. And it'll ask you to confirm. Or you can simply select them by I click one and then I hold down shift on my keyboard and I click another and I drag it. Oops. Sorry, my mouse is a little sensitive. I can drag it to the trash. So now there's no change. I'm back to normal. So what this does is it protects the integrity of the original layer, which is nice. So now I want to do a couple of fun things with you just to kind of show you some select tools and some other stuff. So the first thing I want to show you is, like, typically people get photos and they want to touch up different types of like blemishes and what have you. So the keyboard shortcut is Control T, but that's really to edit, transform, scale. And so the keyboard shortcut for that is Command T or Control T if you're in a PC or Mac. And if I click and drag, you'll notice that no matter where I move my cursor, it scales it with perspective. Now that's a change in Photoshop, because Photoshop 5 years ago you used to be able to click and drag it and it wouldn't keep it perspective. It would do this. So the way I'm able to get past that is I hold shift and I let it go. So like I'm gonna do Control Z. So like if I just do it regular without clicking anything, it'll do that. If I hold shift and click, I can change it however I want. Typically, you want to keep things in perspective. I rarely ever do this, ever, because it really distorts the image. So I prefer not to do that. You can also do Control and Shift. Sorry, not that one. Alt Shift, and it scales it from a point. So like Alt Shift allows you to do this. So instead of working one side, it works both sides at the same time equally. Oh, and you can also hold, you can also just hold down Alt, and it'll scale it proportionately like that. So what I usually typically do is, you'll see how it's snapping. There's some tools up here in View that right here is Snap. So anytime I start moving this around, it's snapping, and that's what it does. But that helps align your graphics. So I'm going to do Control T again, and then I'm just going to scale this up so it fills the whole window, and then I'll adjust it by moving it. So the move is up here, but anytime you want to move something, you want to move your artboard. So this area that we actually visibly see is called the artboard. And if I hold down shift, you'll see that my cursor turns into a hand, and that allows me to move the artboard. So say I transform something, but I'm zoomed in. If you hold down shift, even if you're in transform, you can grab the hand and move it around until you reach your like corners, and then size it again. And then hold down space bar again. It's space bar, sorry, not shift, space bar to move it around. And then you can use shortcuts like Control plus and minus on your keyboard to zoom in and out. Kind of the same way in a browser, you hit Control or Command plus or minus on the top of your keys, it zooms in and out. So there I'm just going to hit enter again. And so now we have, that's your kind of a quick and dirty way of editing. You can also do some other stuff with scale. So like if I do Control, oops, sorry. So there's different scalable pieces there. Kind of get the distort, and there used to be a keyboard shortcut for it, and it's not working quite on this one. But if you do like skew or distort or free transform, sorry, give me a sec here. Reset this. So if you do distort, You could do perspective stuff like this. So if you want to do like if you have a plane that you want to align your image to, you can actually distort it in a way that looks real. If I click off of this or to click the move tool, it'll apply it. So there's different options for transforming here. There's also typically with scale, you could rotate it, but it's probably easier to just go here and go to rotate. There used to be a keyboard shortcut for a lot of these. I'm finding are changing or evolving as Adobe CC updates. But right here, if you go to rotate, you could just rotate. And if you hold down Shift, it'll go every 15 degrees. If you don't hold Shift, you can kind of freeform it. So there's different ways to actually like adjust and resize your photo. Just remember though, if your photo is smaller than the actual artboard originally, when you scale it up, you're going to lose quality with pixels. So that's an important thing to know. Now let's look at a few things. The reason why I wanted to do this one is to fix like blemishes or update photos. So most of the things that I do are spot healing. So you could do a spot healing brush. And you'll see the difference there. There's like a birthmark or like an age mark. You can do some stuff like that. You can also do, which is my favorite, the patch tool. So like say I want to select this area. If I move that, so let me go back. So if I select this area with the patch tool, it selects it. Now I click and drag to another area of the photo and it'll basically copy that area. See that? So that's one way of doing it. Another one is the healing brush tool. And so like with all of these tools up here, you can actually adjust your brush. So if you want it bigger and you want soft edges, you could do something like that. And so like when I hold down Alt, like say I want to copy this area right here, I hold down Alt and I click on this. And then when I paint, you'll see that it's pulling from that area that I Alt clicked on. It's basically copying it. So if I click here with Alt and then I paint over here, it's copying from that pixel range. So this is a quick way to kind of clear up blemishes or take off little marks or things within a photo to kind of clean it up. And it's a really fast, professional way to do that. Some other things you could do is content aware fill. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Control T. Oops, not that one. Control T. I gotta select the right image. I'm going to size this up. There we go. Now, there's some cool things with selection tools. So you have your typical selection tools where you can select space. You can move it around. I can actually copy this. If I just hit Control C like a regular copy, I can create a new layer. And I can paste that. Okay, I pasted that in there. And so now I have a copied version of that. Move around. So there's some cool things you could do with selection tools. Oops. There's single row. So if you just want to get like a line, you can copy that. But it basically just selects a line vertically or horizontally. And then there's kind of freeform tools. So there's a lasso tool where you can select stuff. There's a poly lasso tool where you can click, click, click. Actually, back in the day, people used to do this. So like when they would select things, they would do this type of thing right here, where they would tediously go around. And then if you see how I did that, it double clicked and it selected it. So if people messed up and double clicked, it would select it premature for them finishing the selection. So it's actually not a really advised way to work through it. but it is a way to quickly select stuff. And then there's magnetic lasso. So if I click here, you'll notice that it's sticking to pixels. Pixels that have drastic change in color, it actually separates the selection based on that. So you see that I'm just dragging it. I'm not even clicking, I'm just dragging it. And then it selects it that way. So there's magnetic lasso tool. Oops. There's these other tools like the wand tool. Let me zoom out here. So the wand tool will select like a pixel range based on a color. So like right here it says tolerance 32. That means that within a range of 16 and 16. So like we have a color pixel or tone that's a specific color. Now it'll expand the selection of that color by 32 different shades plus and minus. So if I click here, it'll select light colored. So like if I reduce the tolerance to 5 or 6, you'll notice that I'll get less pixels being selected. So the tolerance makes a difference of how wide a range of the colors you want us to be able to select. There's also this content aware. So once you get your selection, and there's quick select tools. So this one also you just click and drag. It's kind of like the magnetic lasso, except the magnetic lasso selects a line between contrasted areas in the photo, where the quick select tool just gets large areas of color that you drag over. So typically I'll just do this. And you'll see right here, I have a pretty clean design around her, except for the arm right there. See, I pulled in some of the pixels on her arm. So my favorite way to quickly select something and separate it is this quick select tool. Then to edit my selection, which is an interesting concept, so you can edit a selection. If you click this box down here that says edit in quick mask mode, you can click that box and you'll see that my selected area is clear and the unselected area is red. So you'll see also that my paint is black and white right here in my little paint cue on the left. And so if I get a brush, which is down here, I can actually paint on the red or paint on the clear. So the white is the clear, the black is the red. So like if I want black, I can zoom into this area right here. And I can quickly, and you'll notice that it's coming in real thin. That's because I have the flow at 48%. If you want it coming in full range, opacity and flow, you move those up and then you'll notice that it's darker. See that? And then my brush is too big and too soft, so I'm going to turn the size down and I'm going to put the hardness of the edges. This is for the edges of the brush. And then you'll see here I have a cleaner line. So right now I'm adjusting my selection. And so let's go a little smaller here. So right here I'm adjusting my selection and really fine-tuning my selection. So by me painting on the red, I'm getting rid of selected area. And so like I'm going to clean up that, yada yada, right? You can really fine-tune your selection. So like right here, I would fill in all this. I'd probably do it a little faster with a bigger brush, but I'm just going to do it really faster for demonstration purposes. But you want to fill in all this area. You can also go like this. You can also fill in an area like this, and then go to your bucket tool and then do a fill of that color. And then I'll go back to my paintbrush. I'll continue doing my thing. And this is really a way to fine-tune your images in terms of cleaning up images. So right here, I'll probably just actually go along the edge here. Do something really generic just for demonstration purposes. And then I'll fill it. There we go. And then you'll notice that when I untoggle this selection mask, which is right down here, my selection is now clean. So I'll zoom out. Now I have the selection I want. I want to get rid of that sky and I want to put a different sky in. So what you could do to be safe, if you really wanted to, is you can go to select and you can go to save selection, and then I'm just going to call this background with girl and motorcycle or motor. And so like you can save a selection. So like if I deselect it, I can go back and load selection and then select, I guess it was untitled. Sorry, where is it? All right, background girl. Okay. So now I bring back the selection. Now what I want to do is mask this. So remember, we always got to maintain the integrity of the original image. So to maintain the integrity of the original image or layer, I'm going to do a mask layer. So this little button down here in the far bottom right by next to effects, I'm going to click on that. And you'll see it took out the gal and the bike. So I don't want that. So I'm going to do Control Z. And so what I'm going to do is invert that selection. So inverse that selection. So basically make the selection opposite. So I'm going to go select, inverse, and it selects everything opposite of my selection. So now when I click this mask tool, it just gets rid of the background. Now we're in business. So now I'm going to turn on the layer I have for a different background. And so I'll get this layer. And of course I need to size it up. So let me adjust my canvas here. And I'm going to do Control T to resize this. And then there you have it. So like if I was really trying to make this look realistic, what I would do is clean up these edges around the trees and get rid of that little like white halo over it. And then what I would probably do is put an effects layer over this. So I would double click this layer and I would do a gradient overlay. Give me 1 sec here. And then I would do different colors. So I'd probably go for like reds or oranges to give something similar to the photo. So I'd do something like this, maybe not as harsh. So something a little more subtle, something like that. Then I would do, so you could see darken, you could see multiply, you can look at these different filters and see what works best. Typically overlay works really well. And then I want to reduce that. So if I wanted to give my photo just like a slight orange tone to match that background, I could do something like this. And then you have an image that matches the background. So as long as you clean up the edges. So you can actually click on this layer mask. Oops. Cancel that. I'm just selecting that. Okay, it's selected. So if I go in here, I can actually make sure I can select the layer mask by this little white highlight over layer 3. And then I can go in and paint in any changes. So black will remove. So if I get in close, right here, I can actually touch this up by getting rid of those edges in mask mode. So this is what I would typically do if I was doing like a professional level photo touch-up. And then in addition to that too, I would probably do like blemish touch-up. So I'd get rid of that little white dot. So I'd click back onto the regular option. And then I would do a smaller brush. Smaller than that. So I do all these different things. I would do these little options to like fix up the photo, and then I would be done with my photo. So that's one example of like how you can use select tools and layer adjustments and things to kind of manipulate your photo. And I'm going to give a couple, I guess I'll pause there for a second. Are there any questions before I move on to some other examples? Another cool thing I wanted to show you, so like if you have a cool image like this, but there's something in the background that's really kind of impeding the image a little bit, making it not look so great, there's some options you can do here. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust this up. So I don't want this little like weed in the back here. So like what I could do is I can do a generic selection, and I can select that area. Now I have that selected, I don't want that one piece of grass there. I want it blurred kind of like the rest, or I don't like the way it looks. Even though it's not that bad here, I'm just kind of using an example. What I could do is select that area, and then what happens though is that when you have like an area like this that has pixels that are slightly different, but it has like a background that's similar, you can use this cool thing called content aware fill. So if I select it, I can right click it and then do fill or content aware fill. And then what it'll do is it'll give me options of what it looks like. So over here on the right, that looks pretty good. So it's basically pulling from this light green area to refill this area here. So you'll notice what it looks like on the right here. So you can do auto, you can do rectangular, custom, you can do some adjustment settings here like color adaptions. So there's some more granular tools I'm not going to get into. For the most part, the automated feature works. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply, and you'll see how that grass went away. And you hit OK. And then I can deselect that, and now I have a new space there with that grass. So there's just a quick little content aware fill piece that's pretty good. That's a great feature if you want to fill in areas. So you'll see it created that content aware fill as its own layer. So if I select that, you'll see it covers that area. It's kind of cool. Now for some other examples. I'm going to take this photo right here. I'm going to scale it up. Okay. Now I'm going to drag this down. I'm going to move this over a bit. And I'm going to say, okay, if we want this guy, you do some fun stuff like this. So this is just an example of how you want to like superimpose something, right? Like this is just a really generic example. But you can see here that I would do the same thing. So I would give this a layer mask. Then I would get a brush. I would make sure black selected because that removes. And then I would size this up just a hair, maybe a little less. Then I would zoom in a little bit. And I would erase pieces to make it look like it's behind the rock or over the rock. You know, you do stuff like this. Just kind of make it look a little more natural. All right. Then you want to give it maybe a adjustment. So I change like do color balance. And give it like a smaller tone. So I'm applying like a real subtle color balance over the whole thing. And then for the individual layer, you can actually do the same thing for an individual layer. So you can go to layer, image, adjust, and then I can go to color balance. And I can actually do that for the individual layer instead of the whole thing. So I might give it maybe some tones that would match the background a little bit. Do some stuff like that. You'll notice that you have some really nice deep reds in there, so you want to hit those same tones, and you can actually use this as kind of like reflecting off the background, like what looks similar. Do some cool stuff like that. And then hit OK. So you could do some fun stuff like that, and then you can add text, right? So another part I wanted to add is text. So there's a few different other tools you have in here. So you have like clone stamp tool. So the clone stamp tool is similar to the other healing brush tool that I showed you earlier, where you hit Alt, and then you can paint in areas that match the area that you checked. So there's some tools like that. You could do a history brush tool where you paint the area that, so I just turned on the layer, so the history brush tool's taking away the layer. So it applies whatever history you just did. Then of course, if you have like markup, so if you actually just straight paint on a layer, so say I created a new layer and I straight painted on it, so it's pink right here, and I have a brush and I just draw pink, these other tools just like erase and, you know, whatever. And then with that layer, you can actually apply overlays to that. So you can darken it, color burn. You could do all those cool things. I'm going to go ahead and turn that layer off. And you can turn the layers on and off by just clicking the eye next to it, and that toggles those on and off. So it's really fun. You could do a paint bucket fill. I'm going to turn this back on. I'm going to change the color. You can change the color by clicking in here. You can actually pull from a color of the photo by clicking this eyedropper. Or you can simply select a range, or you can add a hex code. So a lot of different things you can do here. There you go. And then you can fill. And you could do crazy stuff like this. So there's a lot of fun things you could do with some of these tools. You can actually give it a gradient overlay. You know, so you can blend this a multitude of ways. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff with colors. So there's just a couple examples. You can actually, this is a good way to do this. So like this blur tool, and it might be better for this one. This blur tool, I can actually blur out like large areas. So if you want to edit a photo and blur an area out, you could do that, and you'll see how it's blurring the image. It's kind of a generic tool. It's kind of like a gimmicky tool, but it helps for certain contexts. You can sharpen or smudge. So you can smudge something. Sharpen will sharpen it, but it'll get highly pixelated, so it doesn't actually look that good. The sponge tool will actually remove color. So if you do this, you'll notice it's turning my dinosaur black and white. And you probably can't see it that well. So I'll go back to this layer. And you'll see that I'm going to, come on. I don't know if it's real noticeable here. Let me try this one instead. Oh yeah, there it is. So see by the guy right here? I'm taking out the color in the water. So it basically desaturates it. So some cool things there. And then of course you have this freeform tool. So you have a pen tool where you can actually work with vectors. And then you can apply selections to those vectors. So you can create vector mask, which would basically crop whatever image you're doing into a certain area. You can make a selection from that. I also didn't show you earlier, if you make a selection, you can also give it a feather. So like if I fill this selection, with a color, there's that, right? Now I'm going to change the feather to 50 pixels. And I'm going to do a new selection. Now I'm going to fill that layer. And the 50 pixels just gives it a feather. So that's basically the concept of a feather. We could do some things there with vectors. And then, of course, you have your type tool. So there you can type vertically, or you can type horizontally, or you can do like a mask or like an outline of text. But typically, you just use a text tool like do something like that. You can highlight it, and then up here you have your tools. So you have like all your fonts. What's nice about Adobe, though, Adobe Photoshop, is that you can sync Adobe Photoshop to Adobe Creative Cloud, and you can add fonts. You can add really high-end fonts, and it's a really handy tool to get really creative with fonts and such. So if you wanted to, you can add fonts, and it opens up a window where you can apply fonts. And sorry, I'm getting distracted here by messages and texts. My apologies. But you can do some cool stuff. So typically, you know, whatever your aesthetic is, you can add fonts. And you'll notice too that you'll see this little icon right here. It has a little Adobe Creative Cloud icon. Those fonts are the ones that I've actually pulled from the font library that you get access to with Adobe. So it's really cool in the sense where you can get highly customized and really professional. And then, of course, you can size that. You can actually click in here, in this top area up here, and then scroll and size them up that way. You could change the weight, the alignment. You can actually warp the text if you wanted to. And you can change the rate at which it's warped or arched. So there's some fun things you could do there. You can also change the color of the text. You're going to do something that's close to the color scheme. You can actually pull from the color scheme and then give it a little bit brighter color. Something that has good contrast is always a good rule of thumb. And then you could design that. You could throw in some more text and say,
Aaron?
Yeah.
Teresa, how do you pull from the font library? And which font library do we pull from?
Yeah, let me show you that. Give me a sec here. The only reason why I didn't jump to it is because I would have to unshare my screen and then share a browser screen. But let me do that here in a moment. And so, yeah, there's some fun things you could do here. You know, by creating like fun little graphics. So like right here, I just superimposed an image, colored it, and then gave it some text, and it kind of looks semi-professional and fun. But really, you want to when you want to get the text, you just click on it, and then you click more from Adobe, and you click this little icon right here on the top right. See, it says Browse Adobe Fonts. So if you click that, it actually opens up a font window. And you can't see it, but let me reshare my screen, and then I'll show you what it looks like real quick. So it basically opened up a browser window with this window in here, and you'll see it says APS technology because I searched for that before. So if you search like you know, Bandolier Elementary, you can actually test the font that you want to see. So I'll just hit enter. Oh, sorry, I was searching for fonts. I did that wrong. My bad. I haven't been here in a while either. It's right here. So if you actually want to see what it looks like, what you're trying to type, you can come in here and do that. And then right here, you can actually, I guess, look at tags that looks similar. Like if you want something funky or like whatever, they have different scheme that you can select from. You can also do like weight. So you can do sans serif, you can do serif, sans serif. You could do weight, you could do width. So there's many different options you have here of how to sort through fonts. If there's a specific font that you're aware of, you can actually search for that, and that's what this is for over here. But basically, this gives you kind of like a nice filtering system to kind of drill down for the aesthetic you want. And then what you do is like once you find that font, you can simply add it. So like this is kind of a cool font. So I'll say View Family. And most of these fonts have different weights. So there's like a multitude of versions of these fonts. So what I'll usually do is look at the font family. And so what you could do is activate up to 100 of these fonts in Adobe Creative Cloud. So you can use this across the board for like video editing, Photoshop, etc. And what you would do is just find the ones that you think you're going to use. So like, I don't know if I'll use italicized, but I'll definitely use this like weighted font here. So I just basically toggle that, and it says you activated your font. And then I'll toggle this one, and then it'll give me saying you activated it. And then you can get out of there. Then you can go back into Photoshop. And so that font was called Gimlet Micro. And you'll notice that when I go back in here, I don't believe I'll see it right away. Oh, it is. Okay, so they've actually fixed that. So before I used to have to like get out of the layer and maybe even restart my design for the font to be applied to the system, but it looks like I did it real time. So I just added these two fonts right here, Gimlet Micro, and there they are. So you'll see how real time that is. Then you can resize it, and there you go. So that's how you access different fonts inside of Photoshop. So again, here in Photoshop, you have a few other tools. So these are all vector based. So like these tools up here are for vectors that you want to create. You actually have shapes that you can add. So if I add a rectangle, you'll notice it creates a font and a layer for me for that rectangle. They can toggle on and off. All right, and you could do the same thing with circle, triangle. You can actually change the fill color of that to a theme that you're working with. But see how these are the most recently used colors, so it actually pulls from the color up here. You can give it a stroke. You can give it a thicker stroke. You can do some alignment. You can also do other custom shapes. So there's like a shape library you can do. So there's a couple other presets up here on the top right that you can kind of pre-toggle. So I'm working with essentials, but you can actually do like graphic and web design, motion design, painting, photography. But it basically changes your tools in your interface. So I keep it on essentials. And essentials has effects, shapes, and you also have history. One thing I forgot to note is that you can set this threshold. I think I have it set to 100 or 50. No, probably 50. But you can toggle between your last 50 changes. You see that? It's like version history. You can basically select previous versions of the document based on your changes. So history is a really nice tool to kind of go back or undo things. And you can actually go in your preferences and change that. So I'm forgetting where my preferences are. Give me a sec here. There we go. So your preferences kind of is your workspace. So you can make a few things. So like if I go to, should be under history. There we go, history log. So if I turn on history log, you could save metadata, text files, both. Maybe it's not here. I haven't changed this in a while because usually I never have to go back more than 50, but there's a way that you can change it back. Oh yeah, there it is. 50. So it's under performance. So obviously if you move this up, it'll actually slow down the application. So if you go higher than 50, it's going to slow down the application. You can actually toggle on 1,000 history links inside a document, but it'll really slow down the processing of your computer and the app itself. So typically I just leave it at 50. And that's fine. If you'll get a scratch disk error. So if you have a computer that's low on memory, sometimes you'll have a scratch disk error saying that we can't make the change in Photoshop, or we can't open up your document in Photoshop, or whatever thing you just did in Photoshop. You'll get a scratch disk error. That means that you need to allocate more memory, especially if the memory on your computer is really being used up, especially the RAM. You can allocate more available RAM right here by sliding that over. So if you ever run into that, that's a good helpful tool. because it's kind of a weird thing that you gotta figure out how to do. You can also change like things like your cursors, your transparency, like you can show like a grid behind. So like when I turn off all these layers, there'll be like a grid behind, so you know it's transparent. And then you have other things too. Like if I do Control R, that gives me a ruler. So you see how I get a ruler turned on or off. What's nice is I usually work with rulers typically. I didn't have it on today, but what you could do is set those rulers to pixels or inches. So here it's inches. And then you can drop guides. So say you're designing like a postcard and you want that postcard to have like, I don't know, borders or something. What you could do is drag like, okay, so like a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch all the way around. You can drag guides. So you click and drag out of the ruler. And then you have guides to work to. And then things will snap to this guide, which is nice. And then what you could do is make selections based on that. So you can come in here and, you know, now you have some guides and areas that you want to select from. So you can select and you'll see how it snaps. And then what you could do is things like this. You can let's see if this works here. No, it didn't work. Sorry. I was just trying something I hadn't tried before. So I'm going to reselect. And then I'm going to open up this. And then I'm going to crop that. And so like you could do stuff like this where like you apply the selection using guides over a certain area to give it different tones or color. And then if you want, you can actually go up here to view and you can go to show and then you can hide the guides or you can show the guides. You can also clear the guides as well. So guides are a simple thing. Ruler is good. Going back to shapes, you also have a line tool. So you can make lines and you can give that line a specific color and weight. And actually, I don't want to give it a stroke. I want to give it a, I'll take away the width of that and do the fill. And then you can actually size up that line. So there's some cool things you could do there. And then of course you could drag your layers. So see how this line's behind the dinosaur? I can actually drag it above it or drag it down below it. So there's different ways I can drag it behind the picture. You don't even see it. So you can drag and drop layers. You could do some custom tools or custom shapes rather. If you click up here in shapes, you'll see that you have kind of baseline shapes. You have anywhere from like wild animals to flowers to trees to, if you click this little gear over here on the right, you can actually import shapes. And sometimes you can download shapes online and then import them into Photoshop like custom shapes. You can also add or append default shapes. Sorry, what it usually does is it gives you an option to select what shapes you want to add. But I think I added all the shapes already, so I can add them. So basically, when you start off, you only have basic shapes. And then what I did is I added all these other shapes. And so like you can select that hibiscus or whatever it is, hollyhock, not sure what it is. And you can select and drag it like that. And then you can transform it. Move it around, you know, make it part of the design. So it's kind of a fun thing. There's preset shapes. It's an easy thing. This hand thing, remember, is the one you drag around. That could be done by a shortcut by using spacebar. That's usually what I do. And of course, you have your zoom tool. So you can hit plus, and if you hold down Alt, you can plus is default, negative is holding down Alt. And then, of course, spacebar is moving it around. You can use keyboard shortcuts like Control plus and minus. That's what I usually do typically. So a few different things there. You can also view fit on screen and view fit layers on screen. So if you have a specific layer, you can select that layer and then view select layer on screen, and it'll zoom into that layer or the outer edges of the layer. And then you can do 100%, you know, things like that. So there's different options here. You can fit on, you can see print size or actual size. You know, so a lot of fun different pieces there. Usually I like to fit on screen, and then I zoom out just one, and then it's pretty good size. So a lot of different things there. There's some crazy stuff you could do with channels and paths where you can do like displacement maps. And let me see if I can do that. Let me see here. I'm going to try this really quickly before we get into fonts again. So I'm going to drag this. Oh, there's another thing you could do here. So you see I made a copy of that dinosaur. So I'm going to turn off one copy. I just made a copy of it. To make a copy, you can drag into the plus right here, and it makes a copy of the layer. So that's a quick little shortcut. So like say I want this background image only to be viewed within the shape of that dinosaur. You can hover over right in between the layers. So you see my little hand is in the bottom right. If you hover over that and then hold down Alt on your keyboard, you see how that changes? Click on that. Actually, the dinosaur is showing through the image in the back. So let me reverse that. So Alt. And I must have, oh yeah, I have a dinosaur above it. So sorry, you didn't get to see that. So I have the background over a dinosaur, right? So the dinosaur is right there. If I want to show that background image inside the dinosaur shape, that's how you do it. So that's a cool little handy trick you could do as well. You could do a displacement map. And God, I haven't done this in such a long time. I don't even know if I'll be able to remember how to do it. Let me see. It's really an advanced feature. What you do is do a displacement map. You distort a background image based on the image of something else. So you can take like a splatter and then make an image displacement map and then apply it to another image, and then it displaces that image in that shape. It's weird. It's kind of cool. So and you'll see here, here's your selections under channels as well. Okay, I'm not going to go there because I totally forgot how to do it. I thought I'd be able to remember offhand, but I don't. There's some other things you could do with layers as well in terms of organization. So say like this is my design. You can select one layer and then hold down Shift and select all these layers, and then right click and then go group from layers. And you can, and then you'll see it gives this pop-up box, and I'm going to call it Dino. You could even give it a color if you want. And then now I have that design set up separately. And then now I'm going to turn that off. And then I'm going to select these two layers. So this is how you organize your files. I'm going to select those, right click, and group from layers, and call it Doge, from the old Dogecoin thing from Corgis. Kind of fun. Let's see. Call this green. And then now you can toggle between your designs, which is nice. And then you click the drop-down menu to turn off certain things. And then last but not, I mean, the most important thing that I can't believe I haven't even done it once this time, is save. So you always want to save to your computer typically. So when you say save as right here, this is actually good to mention. So it says, do you want to save it to the cloud? You only get like a gigabyte of storage on cloud. They charge for their storage, which is kind of lame because all these files are so big. But you can save a certain amount on the cloud where you can access it from any device. But typically I just save to my computer. And then I'll say tech damn yes. and I'll save it to my desktop, and then I have that file. So anytime you're working, Photoshop doesn't have an autosave feature. So that's really important to know, because I've done work where I've spent literally hours like working with these photos and making them look really beautiful, and then I forget to hit Control Save or Command Save, and it just kills me. So always remember to save. And remember, if you make any changes, you can't save unless you make changes. So I'm just toggling this on and off. And then I hit Control or Command S, and it saves. So just do that often, anytime you're working with this. But that's basically it. There's so much other pieces and tools that you can do. I think I went through most of the basics with this. There's a lot you can do with vector graphics. You can actually import or open up other files. You can import PDFs, and I'll try to do that, which is interesting, because sometimes you can import PDFs that are images. And let's see here. Let me see if I can find something. We don't want to introduce that. Let's try this one, I guess. So you can actually open up weird files like PDFs, and what it'll do is, what's interesting though is you can save this file as a PDF, and it's editable PDF, but you can edit it like Photoshop, but it's a PDF. It's weird. But you'll see here, here's a multiple page document. So you can actually open up a PDF and then import like one page from it. So I want to import page 15, and you'll notice the settings. I clicked on it too fast, but it says you want to import it at like pixels per inch. So it gives it like a pixel size. So if I go to image size, you'll see that it imported. This is how big it is. It's 8.5 by 11, so it's a letter, and it has high resolution, 300 pixels per inch. The baseline standard for print is 300 pixels per inch. So anytime you want to print something high quality, it always should be 300 pixels per inch. So that's just a way for you to import a PDF to make it work as an image. And now my computer's freezing, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. Oh yeah, I'm actually zooming in, and you can see the pixels here. So you can see really each pixel. Each of these squares is a pixel. So that's how these raster images work. Whereas if I drag over here a circle, like a vector circle, you'll notice that it creates a vector circle, but it's being viewed as in a pixel format. If I had this in Illustrator, it wouldn't be all messy like that. It would be clear. It'd be clean, because it's a true vector graphic, but we're working in a raster interface. So you're going to see a pixel, even though this is a vector, meaning that it could be scaled to any size infinitely. So, and really, if you want to start working with this with kids, if you ever dabble with kids, it's kind of fun to look at like the presets. So if you want to do like a print poster, like you could do a total thing where you want to do branding for something. Like you do a service learning project or authentic learning project where you say, okay, we're going to make a new soda. Let's select the aluminum can, yada, yada, download that, continue, it'll download it, and then it'll open it. And you'll see over here that it's actually downloading it now, but you can only use the free ones. So you have pre-made templates where you can actually have kids work in there and design things. So there's some fun options there. There's some other options with the apps too on Chromebook. So if you guys have any questions about that, you can also certainly explore that with our team later, and we can work with you for that specifically. Now, really quickly before we, okay, go ahead.
No, I just think, so if this is, if we buy our license independently just for ourselves, then we can log in on our regular PCs, but we can also, if we grab a kid's Chromebook, we can log in and get the stripped down version and like.
Right. And I think it only allows you to log into 2 computers at one time.
Okay.
So you could log into your Chrome for those light versions of the apps on your PC, and it should be fine. But the minute you start logging into another PC at home, it'll make you log out. It'll log you off of that one, or the work one.
Okay, and you have to have an APS email to get the license.
Yeah, they'll do it through APS email, but you can use it for personal stuff. I mean, it's supposed to be for education. So I mean, if you started a full-fledged business, I probably wouldn't use it. But if you do a few graphics here and there for a little side gig, or for presentations, or to help out family, or even if you started a side gig and you did some initial designs, I'm sure it wouldn't be a big deal.
No, I just had old Photoshop elements, and this is just so cool. So
yeah, and it's so cheap too. So
yeah.
So getting back to this real quick. So if you activate fonts, you have your interface over here, and you'll see here that I can add to my favorites. So if I want to add this whole suite to a favorite, I can do that there. Or you can toggle that off. And where is it? My Adobe Fonts. So I'm going to click on My Adobe Fonts over here in the top right. And right here is where you can deactivate all your fonts. If you just go to My Adobe Fonts, you can see the ones that were previously active. You can do web projects, your favorites. So I have the favorites in there, and then the active fonts. And then you just toggle off the ones you don't want to use. So I'm gonna disable these ones I just enabled because I won't use them. And so you can see I think I have 100, but it's really cool. I mean, it's a fun way to really get interactive and really expand upon your design skills and creativity. Even if it's for your own personal school branding, personal, I'd say too, like get comfortable with this stuff. You could do a lot of stuff for social media. You can do personal projects for family and friends. If you get a startup in business, you can use this as a way to really skill up your knowledge on Photoshop. I really didn't get too much into like photo editing and things, but I can show you a couple things really quickly. But most of the things I did were just manipulating photos, not really color grading. But if you wanted to, you can get fancy with some color grading stuff. And you know, you can take images like this and do some fun things. Like I've done really contrasty photos where I make it look like a movie poster. So you could do some fun things with these objects, with these images rather. Where you could do HDR toning. I'm going to proceed. It's going to mess up my whole project, but I saved it already. So what it does is it flattens your project, but you could do some fun stuff like this, where you give high contrast photos, and you hit OK, and you hit OK, but you see it destroyed all my layers there. And then I'm going to File, Open. I'm going to drag in that very same one. Then I'm going to drag this over. Close that. And typically I would align these better. Try to make them the same size instead of working from 2 different layers like this. But close enough. Anyways, you could do some stuff like this where I can't work with the background layer also. That's another thing to know. So what you could do is you can give this a layer mask. Here are 2 of them. And then you can delete all of it. And then what you could do is paint in stuff. So it can paint in. I can paint in the color. This is when people get really crazy with their Photoshop editing skills. They start painting in the color. And that's actually too much. So I'll turn down the opacity, turn down the flow, and then really lightly start painting in these highlights to make it really glow. But this is how people do really cool stuff, like with color. So I might want to get some of those warm tones and then some of these edges here. Anyways, you could do they paint in real subtle pieces of the photo to make things glow. You see that? So there's some fun things you could do with Photoshop. Really, sky's the limit. You just gotta. It takes a lot of time and a lot of practice. If you wouldn't mind, I'm gonna plug in the. I'm gonna go back over here and plug in these useful resources. But if you guys need help with edtech things. And I'm sorry, there was a question just right now around continuing ed. Continuing ed and other organizations offer actual in-person course for this. No, but I can sit down with you and do an in-depth course and show you a whole bunch of other stuff. We can focus on photo editing, photo superimposing, graphic design. I can show you all kinds of stuff. So just request a training, If you want it, you can request a training on the EdTech training. So the fourth link down, EdTech training, that's where you request a training. And you can individually do it or do it with a group. You can ask a question with EdTech questions. So if you need help with support in getting these licenses, you could do that as well. If you wouldn't mind, use the top link to provide feedback for this session. And then, of course, lastly is our website. So if you have, if you want to learn more about what we do and how we can support you, please visit our site. And with that, I'll leave you today. And hopefully you got gained some good, useful knowledge of Photoshop. And hopefully you go on and create and make some great things. Thank you all.